In the cardiac ICU, I've seen every way a heart can stop, but only once have I seen a heart open like a door. I have worked in the cardiac intensive care unit for over a decade. I've seen people coded blue and dragged back from death. I've stood at bedsides as families whispered goodbyes. I've felt the weight of holding another person's last heartbeat between my hands. Nothing surprises me anymore, or so I thought. We live by routine in the ICU. It's how we survive the noise, the alarms, the constant proximity to mortality. You learn to catalog every patient by numbers, BP, HR, spiel, rhythm, strip. You tell yourself you're a custodian of data, not of lives. But some nights, the numbers stop being numbers. Some nights, they whisper back. The case that changed me forever began like any other transfer. A man in his late 50s with a history of cardiac surgery, found unresponsive at home, intubated in the field, rushed in under a cloud of medical jargon. No family, no name on his chart, just John Doe, bed 7. His vitals were stable but strange. A double QRS complex on every beat, 2 hearts firing at once. I didn't think much of it at first. Weird rhythms happen. Electrodes misfire. Machines glitch. But from the first night, something about this patient felt off. The way the room's temperature dropped when you entered. The faint sound under the monitors, like a second pulse. The sense that someone else was standing behind you, just out of view. I told myself it was exhaustion. The unit eats nurses alive. But when code blue came at exactly 3:33 a.m. and I watched his chest open like a door to something that should not exist, I realized I was no longer a nurse at a hospital. I was a witness trapped inside a story I didn't understand. This is my account of that night and everything that followed. The hospital buried the paperwork. The attending physicians wrote it off as stress-induced hallucination. But I still feel the second heartbeat in my chest. And every time I close my eyes, I see the inside of bed 7's heart staring back at me. This is my most unexplained case as a cardiac ICU nurse, and it will follow me until my last pulse fades. I have worked the night shift in the cardiac intensive care unit for nearly 11 years. I have seen the whole spectrum of human hearts fail, from the young and unlucky to the old and stubborn. Nothing surprises me anymore. Least that's what I tell myself at the start of each shift. But there was one night that shattered that belief so completely I still wake up at 3:33 a.m. without an alarm, drenched in sweat, listening for a rhythm that isn't mine. That night began like any other, the sterile tang of disinfectant in my nose, the soft hiss of oxygen from wall ports, quiet symphony of cardiac monitors, a song of steady beeps and occasional alarms. The unit was dim but never dark. The fluorescence hummed overhead, casting a pallor over everything. My colleagues and I had slipped into that unspoken rhythm of experienced nurses, where glances and subtle gestures communicated more than words. I had just finished titrating a dopamine drip for a post-op patient in bed 4 when the intercom at the nurse's station buzzed, startling me out of the autopilot trance. It was security. "We've got a transfer coming up from the ER," the voice said. "No family. High priority. ETA is 5 minutes." Transfers at midnight were nothing new. The way the security officer's voice caught, as though he were trying not to say more, made me glance toward Carla, the charge nurse. She raised one eyebrow but said nothing, just made a note on her clipboard. When the elevator doors opened, the air changed. You could feel it before you saw them, 2 paramedics pushing a gurney, a third behind carrying a red cooler, and an ER resident clutching a chart like it might fly away. The patient was male, mid-50s perhaps, but it was hard to tell. His skin was the color of old paper, his lips faintly blue. intubated, restrained at the wrists. The cardiac monitor on the gurney showed a rhythm I'd never seen before. Not a simple arrhythmia, not even something you could classify as ventricular tachycardia or fibrillation. It was layered, like two heartbeats superimposed. We wheeled him into bed 7. As the paramedics rattled off vitals and medications, I started my assessment. Heart rate, or heart rates, were fluctuating between 110 and 180. Blood pressure was barely holding. Oxygen saturation dipped and spiked unpredictably. His pupils were reactive but sluggish. His hands were ice, cold even under the warming blanket. What's his history? I asked the ER resident. He frowned at the chart. That's the thing. We don't know. He was found collapsed in the parking lot behind the hospital. No ID, no wallet, nothing. Paramedics said he was just there. Homeless? Carla asked. Maybe, the resident muttered. But his clothes aren't shabby. There's this. He pointed to a faded scar running vertically down the patient's sternum, a surgical scar, old but healed strangely, like the tissue had been sewn by someone without regard for anatomy. I prepped the central line kit, trying to ignore the rising unease. As I inserted the catheter into his subclavian vein, patient's eyelids fluttered. His lips moved around the endotracheal tube, and though he couldn't form words, a low sound vibrated from his throat. Not a groan, not a cough. More like a chant or a hum. Carla stepped closer. You hear that? Yeah. I tried to shrug it off. Could just be air moving around the cuff. But the monitor changed again. Beeps overlapped. A dissonant duet. I checked the leads. All correctly placed. For a moment, the waveform resembled two hearts trying to sync, falling out of rhythm, syncing again. The ER resident, pale now, muttered, I'll get the attending, and disappeared down the hallway. By 1:00 a.m., it was just me, Carla, and the patient. The ICU was quieter than usual. No code blues, no new admits. It felt like the entire floor had been emptied just for him. I busied myself adjusting drips, double, checking sedation, noting every strange fluctuation in his chart. But the oddities kept stacking up. His skin temperature oscillated by several degrees in minutes. His blood gases showed pH changes inconsistent with his oxygenation. The waveform on the monitor began to form patterns. Not random noise, but actual patterns. For a second, I swore it spelled out Inch-LP in jagged peaks, but when I blinked it was gone. Carla leaned on the doorway, arms crossed. This guy is creeping me out! Yeah, I said. Same. Any family contact yet? No. Security's running fingerprints. She exhaled, the sound loud in the hush. You'd think after all these years we'd stop getting cases like this. We didn't speak for a while. The only sounds were the hiss of the ventilator and the overlapping beeps. Then, exactly 3:33 a.m., the patient's eyes snapped open. They weren't the cloudy, sedated eyes of an intubated patient. They were sharp, dark, aware. He stared straight at me, his pupils dilating. The monitor went flatline for a single, impossible second, and then burst into a double-beat rhythm, louder and faster, the machine shrieking. I jumped, knocking over a tray of syringes. Carla rushed to the bedside. What the hell? The man's arms strained against the restraints. He lifted his head from the pillow despite the intubation tube, and a voice, not from his mouth, but from somewhere inside the room, whispered, "This is not your heart." Then he collapsed back, eyes rolling up, vitals stabilizing as if nothing had happened. The flatline blip erased itself from the memory log, something I've never seen a monitor do. Carla grabbed my arm. "You heard that?" I nodded. My hands were shaking. For the rest of the shift, I documented everything obsessively, but each time I tried to review the monitor's saved rhythms, The files were corrupt or missing. By morning, the attending physician, Dr. Laird, came in to assess the patient. He scrolled through the record, frowned, and said, "Looks like a standard post, cardiac arrest case. Keep him on amiodarone. We'll see if he stabilizes." I opened my mouth to protest, but stopped. Something about Dr. Laird's expression told me not to. It was too neutral, too practiced. When my shift ended at 7:00 a.m., I lingered by the bed. The man lay still, his chest rising and falling under the ventilator. I swear that the ECG waveform pulsed once in time with my own heartbeat, like it knew I was there. I left the unit. The echo of that whispered voice followed me down the hallway, through the locker room, into the parking lot. "This is not your heart." I didn't know then how true those words would become. The next night, walking back into the ICU felt like stepping into a slow motion replay of the night before. Same dim lighting, same sterile scent, same low electronic heartbeat of the machines. I carried something new inside me now, a dread that made my throat dry and my pulse climb before I even reached the nurse's station. Carla gave me a thin smile as I clocked in. "Is still here," she said, nodding toward bed 7. "Any changes?" I asked. "Not the kind you'd expect. He's stable on paper. Vitals steady, vent settings unchanged." She glanced around as if someone might overhear. "He's talking. Sort of." I frowned, sliding into my chair at the station. "Talking, with the tube in?" She nodded. "I'd go see for yourself." I walked to bed 7 slowly, feeling the air thicken as I approached. The patient, still unnamed, still unidentified, lay exactly as before, intubated, hands restrained. But his lips moved under the tape. No sound emerged at first, just the faintest tremor of syllables. I leaned closer, careful not to disrupt any tubing. "Can you hear me?" I whispered, not sure why I was whispering. His eyes fluttered open, just a fraction. His lips formed shapes around the tube. Impossibly fast, almost flickering. It wasn't English, it wasn't any language I recognized, but the cadence was steady like a metronome. As I listened, the cardiac monitor's beeping started to sync with his mouth movements. Beep, 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 faster and faster, until I could swear the monitor was speaking too. I drew back sharply. The monitor returned to a normal sinus rhythm. The ventilator hissed on. Carla appeared at my side, holding a fresh IV bag. "You see it?" "Don't know what I saw," I admitted. "What do the labs say?" "Nothing abnormal enough to explain this," she said. "Potassium, sodium, calcium, all fine. No drugs in his system except what we're giving, the blood gases." She handed me the printout. The pH had dipped into a range inconsistent with life twice during the day and then corrected itself without intervention, turned back to the patient. "It's like he's making his own rules." "Or someone else's," Carla muttered. At 1:45 a.m., something new happened. The room temperature dropped noticeably, though the thermostat hadn't changed. My breath fogged for a moment as I adjusted the IV lines. The patient's hands twitched inside the restraints, fingers flexing as if feeling for something unseen. Then the monitor displayed a pattern again. Not random, not noise. This time it was a perfect waveform spelling 3 numbers, 333. Blinked hard. "Carla, look." She stared at the screen, color draining from her face. "It's just an artifact," she said weakly. But she didn't sound convinced. We tried a full lead change, swapped out the electrodes, even changed the monitor entirely. Each time the number returned 333. Always 333. We called in Dr. Laird. He arrived in his usual unhurried gait, coffee in hand. "Artifact," he said after a glance. "You're seeing patterns because you're tired. Run a 12. Lead if it makes you feel better. We did. The 12-lead ECG printed out a tangle of spikes and dips. But if you held it at arm's length, you could see it like an optical illusion. SELP in the tracing, then 333 on the next page. Carla and I exchanged looks. Dr. Laird tore the printout in half and tossed it in the shred bin. "Focus on the patient," he said, "not on ghosts in the machines." But the machines didn't care about his orders. The ventilator alarm went off next, showing a pressure drop that didn't exist. Pulse oximeter displayed spiel levels of 0% for a full 5 seconds, then bounced back to 98% as if nothing had happened. And the patient began to whisper again, the sound curling up from his throat like steam from a vent. I leaned close once more, and this time I thought I caught English words buried in the static of his voice. Not dead, not alive, heart of 2. At 3:33 a.m., the time from the previous night, everything peaked. The lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed. Every monitor in the unit displayed the same double-beat rhythm, even for patients who weren't connected to him. Bed 2, bed 4, bed 9, all showing the same impossible pattern. The whole unit seemed to breathe with one patient's heart, and then, as quickly as it came, it stopped. The lights brightened. The monitors reset. Only our mystery patient remained in the double rhythm. The rest of the unit went back to normal. Carla clutched my arm. "Tell me you saw that." "I saw it," I whispered. "All of it?" We spent the rest of the shift in a state of tense hyper-vigilance, documenting everything we could, even as files corrupted on the screen. Each time we tried to save a waveform, the file disappeared. Each time we printed a rhythm strip, the paper jammed or came out blank. By morning, the patient's vitals looked normal again. Dr. Laird came in, cool as ever, made a few notes. "Stable overnight?" he asked. Carla and I exchanged glances. "Stable," I said finally, the lie tasting bitter. He nodded and walked out. After he left, Carla turned to me. "What the hell is happening?" I stared at the man in bed 7. He looked like any other ICU patient now, sedated, pale, still. I could feel a pulse in the air. Not in my veins, not in his, in the air itself, like the room had developed its own heartbeat. "We're going to find out?" I said, though I wasn't sure we ever would. When my shift ended at dawn, I found myself staring at the sunrise with the oddest sensation, my own heart skipping beats in a pattern I didn't recognize, the same pattern as his. By my 3rd consecutive night on duty, exhaustion had carved its way under my skin, yet I couldn't bring myself to take a night off. Part of me told myself it was because of my work ethic. Another part admitted I was afraid to leave him alone. Whatever he was, whatever was happening around him, it felt tethered to me now. The ICU at night can be eerily calm when nothing is going wrong. Even with vents sighing and infusion pumps ticking, the place can feel like a sleeping animal, slow pulse humming through the floors. But now there was an extra note under that hum, something dissonant, like the wrong key pressed on a piano again and again. Carla noticed it too. She was quieter, more brittle, drinking coffee between checks. "Feels like we're babysitting a bomb," she muttered as we passed each other in the hall. Security had increased without explanation. 2 officers stationed outside the ICU doors, something we'd never seen before. They said it was because of unregistered visitors trying to get in, but none of us had seen any. Yet when I walked past the nurse's station, the security feed occasionally showed static, a flicker of something like a figure standing at the end of the corridor, too far to make out. When I'd blink, it was gone. Inside bed 7, the patient's vitals were textbook. Normal, the atmosphere was not. The cardiac monitor's green trace moved like a snake, its double beat now faint but constant. Sometimes, when the unit went quiet, I could swear I heard 2 heartbeats from him, not from the monitor, but from his chest itself. One strong, human, and slow. Another faint, fluttering, out of time. During my early rounds, heard whispering behind me and spun around, no one there. Later, at 100 a.m., while drawing labs, the lights dimmed to a coppery glow. The hallway stretched long and narrow, as if I were looking through a warped lens. I pressed my palms to my eyes, muttering that I needed sleep. When I opened them, everything looked normal again, except Carla staring at me from across the station, her face pale. "You saw it too, didn't you?" she said quietly. I didn't answer. We tried to ground ourselves in routine vitals, labs, drips, ventilator checks. But routine bent under the weight of whatever was seeping through the cracks. We found staff missing from their posts, only to return minutes later, swearing they had never left. The phone at the nurse's station rang at odd intervals, always a dead line when we answered. Once, at 20:17 a.m., I picked it up and heard a heartbeat on the line. It matched his double rhythm exactly. Carla began to keep a notebook. "They're trying to erase it from the system," she whispered. "But paper they can't delete." We started jotting everything down: time, vitals, whispers, flickering lights. We even recorded our own pulses at intervals. More than once, both our pulses matched the patient's rhythm for a few seconds at a time, like a contagion of the heart. At 300 a.m., I went to adjust his restraints. He had been moving more, subtle twitches like a sleeper about to wake, and noticed something new. His fingertips were dark, not cyanotic but stained, as though ink had seeped into his skin. When I pressed a gauze pad to his finger to take a glucose reading, the drop of blood that emerged was almost black. It didn't bead normally but spread, spider webbing across the gauze. When I looked up, his eyes were open, watching me. I froze, lancet in one hand, glucometer in the other. He wasn't sedated enough to be awake, but his gaze tracked me. His pupils were so dilated they swallowed the iris, and for the briefest second, I saw my own reflection in them, except it wasn't quite me. It was me with a tube down my throat, restrained, whispering. I stumbled back. The glucometer beeped an error. Carla's hand closed on my arm. "He's pulling you in," she whispered. "You have to stop staring." We drew the curtain around bed 7 for the first time that night. It felt like drawing a veil over a mirror. The unit grew colder as the night crept on. Frost formed at the corners of the windows. My breath fogged when I spoke. Even the machines seemed sluggish, infusion pumps beeping low as if their batteries were dying despite being plugged in. At 3:33 a.m., the moment had become a ritual. The lights flicker. Something happens. This time was no exception. The overhead fluorescence buzzed, dimmed, then snapped back to full. All the monitors in the ICU, not just bed 7s, displayed the same waveform for a full 10 seconds, not 333, not ALP, but a jagged image like a door, a rectangle, a frame. Then, from somewhere in the unit, a crash echoed, metal on tile. We ran out from behind the nurse's station to find an IV pole lying on the floor in front of the supply closet. The door of the closet stood ajar. Inside, boxes of gloves and gowns had been pushed aside, revealing a small, square hatch in the wall I'd never noticed before. Carla stared at it, clutching her notebook. "This wing used to connect to the old surgical suites," she said. "They sealed it off years ago." We both felt it then's a faint suction, as though the air from our side was being drawn through that hatch, and under it the sound of a heartbeat. 2 heartbeats, faint but steady. We didn't open it. Not yet. We shut the closet door and dragged the IV pole back, pretending nothing had happened. But the sound stayed with us, under the floor, in the walls. By the time dawn broke, neither of us could tell if we dreamed it. The unit warmed, the monitors normalized, the hatch looked like an ordinary patch of wall again. Yet when I hung up my stethoscope, felt a tug in my chest, an echo like a line cast into dark water being reeled in. When I left the hospital, a reflection in the sliding glass doors caught my eye. For a fraction of a second, I saw the patient standing behind me, tube gone, eyes black, whispering. I turned. No one there. I drove home gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Pulse in my ears was no longer my own. It beat double. On my fourth night in a row, fatigue had begun to feel like another organ in my body. Heavy, pulsing, impossible to ignore. The ICU doors opened and closed behind me like the seals of a submarine. And once again, I felt myself submerging, leaving the daylight world behind for the dim fluorescence of the night shift. Carla was waiting at the station, pale from too much caffeine and too little sleep. "We've been trying to get a match on his fingerprints," she said without preamble. "We're getting nothing." I dropped my bag and stared at her. Impossible. "Everyone's in the system somewhere. Exactly." She handed me a printout, a report from hospital security and the local police. Multiple attempts. FBI database too. No match. Not even a near match. Like he's never existed. I glanced toward bed 7. He was still there, tubes and wires, the same faint double beat on the monitor. Could they be wrong? Carla shook her head. We tried prints from both hands. We tried facial recognition from the ER cameras. It's like his body doesn't register as a person. A cold knot settled in my stomach. What about missing persons? Hospitals in the region? Carla looked even paler. We checked. Nothing. We did find something else. She slid another paper across to me. A photocopy of an old newspaper clipping from 15 years ago showed a grainy black and white photo of a man on a hospital gurney, half covered by a sheet, and a headline "Experimental Heart Procedure Ends in Mystery." The man's face in the photo. It was him. Older, younger, but unmistakable. I read the brief article. An unnamed patient at an undisclosed hospital had been part of a classified cardiac trial. Procedure had been halted, and the patient reportedly died. No further records. I looked up. "Where did you get this?" Carla glanced around. An orderly in the basement handed it to me, said it's been passed around quietly for years. We both stared toward bed 7 again. His chest rose and fell under the ventilator. The double rhythm, now almost imperceptible. When the room went still, I could swear I heard faint whispering from his direction, like a radio tuned between stations. "Has anyone claimed the body?" I asked. "No one," she said. No calls, no visitors, no inquiries. That night, the ICU felt even emptier than usual. 2 of our regulars had been transferred out during the day. The beds stood vacant. The hallway outside bed 7 seemed longer, the lighting dimmer. Security was gone too. No guards at the door, no cameras active on the feed. It was as if the hospital had withdrawn its eyes. I decided to call the ER myself. "This is the ICU," I said when the nurse picked up. "Can you confirm the admitting paperwork for our John Doe? The one from 4 nights ago." There was a pause. "We don't have a John Doe from 4 nights ago." I closed my eyes. Check the logs again. More typing. "I'm telling you, we have no record of that transfer. All ER admits from that night are accounted for." I hung up slowly and stared at the phone. Carla's eyes met mine. "They're erasing him," she whispered. We tried to print his chart. The system spit out a single blank page. At 1:30 a.m., a figure appeared in the waiting area outside the ICU doors. A woman in a gray coat, head down, hands clasped in front of her. I saw her on the security feed and hurried out, thinking finally someone had come for him. But when I pushed open the door, the area was empty. The cameras went to static, then blank. Back at the station, Carla was pale. I saw her too. We went to bed 7 together. The patient's eyes were open. His gaze flicked from me to Carla and back, as if he knew we'd been looking for answers. His lips moved around the tube. This time I understood one word, faint but clear. Mother. Carla shivered. Did he just? Yes, I said. We stood there for a long time, not speaking. The monitors beeped. The ventilator hissed, and beneath it all, a faint lullaby hummed from somewhere deep in the walls, a melody I'd never heard, but somehow knew. Pulled out my phone and searched for the headline from the old article. Nothing came up. Not on Google, not in archives. It was as if the clipping itself was the only record left. Maybe, Carla whispered, he's not supposed to have a family. Maybe he's the family. Her words made no sense but sent a chill through me anyway. At 3:33 a.m., the nightly ritual hit again. This time every screen in the ICU went black at once. Not flickered, black. The machine stayed running, the patient stable, but the displays were gone. In the darkened glass of the monitors, I saw faces. Rows of faces staring back at me from the other side of the screen, mouths moving silently. Some were children, some old, some unrecognizable. All had the same black eyes. Carla grabbed my arm. Look at bed 7, she hissed. He was sitting up. Not fully, but enough to strain the restraints. His eyes were wide open now, black and gleaming. He turned his head toward the station, and the monitors flickered back to life, showing normal vitals as though nothing had happened. He collapsed back, motionless. Faces in the screens vanished. We stood there frozen, my pulse hammered in my ears. Carla was whispering something over and over. A prayer, maybe, or just the word, no. When the lights came back, the ICU looked normal again. Bed 7 looked like a regular patient again. But the double beat on the monitor had grown stronger. I didn't even try to go home after my shift. I sat in my car until daylight, staring at nothing, feeling a second heartbeat in my chest. The family that never came was everywhere now, pressed against the glass, whispering. By the time the 5th night rolled around, the rhythm of my life was reduced to 3 things: the antiseptic smell of the ICU, the double beat of bed 7's heart, and the number 3733 glowing like a wound in my mind. I stopped trying to sleep during the day. Every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed of monitors, black blood, and a voice whispering, "Not your heart." That night, the unit was eerily quiet. No transfers, no visitors. Half the beds are empty. The attending on duty, Dr. Laird, didn't even bother making rounds after midnight. He was holed up in the staff lounge with a laptop, face lit by a pale blue glow. It felt as if the entire hospital had been stripped down to its skeleton, and only the bones of the ICU were left. Carla and I worked like ghosts. We checked lines, documented vitals, whispered to each other in low, staccato exchanges. Bed 7 looked like a photograph of himself, unmoving, intubated, restrained. But the double beat on his monitor was stronger than ever, the 2 peaks now almost equal in height, like twin towers rising from the baseline. At 2:55 a.m., I began my usual pre-333 ritual: fresh IV bags, double-check ventilator settings, calibrate the monitor so I'd have a baseline. Carla stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, notebook in hand. "We should call a rapid response before it happens," she said softly. "And tell them what?" I asked. "That at exactly 3:33, he's going to do something impossible again." Carla didn't answer. The unit's overhead clock ticked toward 3:30. I felt my own pulse double, syncopated, as if my body were aligning to his. My hands trembled as I adjusted the drips. I heard whispering again, not from him this time, but from the vents above. Not dead. Not alive. Heart of 2. At 3:32, the ventilator alarmed. High pressure. I ran to check tubing. Nothing kinked. His oxygen saturation dropped from 96% to 70% in seconds. Heart rate spiked to 180, then 190 BP unreadable. "Carla!" I shouted. She was already hitting the code button on the wall. Code blue, ICU bed 7. Alarms blared through the unit. The overhead voice announced the code. Footsteps thundered in the hallway. The patient's body convulsed against the restraints, back arching off the bed, eyes snapping open. His skin darkened as if ink were spreading under the surface. Double beat on the monitor blurred into one continuous waveform, then flatlined. We jumped into motion. "Start compressions!" I barked, climbing onto the stool to reach his chest, began CPR, counting aloud, feeling the sternum yield under my palms. But the resistance was wrong, spongy, almost hollow. Each compression made a low, wet sound that echoed in my own chest. Carla intubated deeper, suctioned, bagged. "No color change," she gasped. "He's not ventilating!" I kept compressing. The crash cart rolled in. Dr. Laird appeared at last, face unreadable. "Charge to 200, he said flatly. We yelled the paddles. "Clear!" The patient jerked under the shock and smiled. His lips curled around the tube. My hands slipped off his chest. "Again," Dr. Laird said. "Doctor," I started, but his eyes snapped to mine with a warning look. We were shocked again. This time the monitor flickered not to a rhythm, but to an image, a jagged rectangle, the same door, shape from before. Behind it, faint faces pressed, dozens, maybe hundreds, all black-eyed. My compressions faltered. The room seemed to tilt, lights bending toward the bed. The code team shouted, voices distant. "Pulse check!" "No pulse!" "Continue CPR." Carla's voice cut through. "Listen," she screamed. We all froze. The room had gone silent except for a sound emanating from the patient's chest. Not a heartbeat, but a chorus of heartbeats, layered, fast, slow, out of sync, like a hive of bees buzzing in rhythm. It grew louder until the monitor itself shook on its stand. Then the man's chest split open. It didn't rupture like a wound. It opened like a door. The old surgical scar along his sternum unzipped, flesh parting without blood. Inside, instead of ribs and tissue, a darkness yawned. A cavity deeper than it should have been, edges lined with what looked like small, beating nodes of muscle, each one pulsing in time with a different rhythm. Carla dropped the ambu bag. Someone screamed. Dr. Laird stepped forward, eyes fixed on the cavity, lips moving as if reciting something under his breath. The patient, or whatever he was, reached up with one unrestrained hand and grabbed my wrist. His grip was ice, cold but impossibly strong. He pulled me closer until my face hovered over the opening in his chest. "This is not your heart," he whispered through the tube. I felt a tug inside me, as if my own heart were sliding toward him, strings pulling through my ribs. For a moment my vision went black and I heard only the double beat. I thought, he's taking it. He's taking mine. Carla tackled me backwards, breaking his grip. I fell hard against the crash cart, gasping. The patient's chest slammed shut like a trap. The monitors all went black, then flashed to a single sinus rhythm. His vitals returned as though nothing had happened. BP 120-80, HR 70, SPIO 99%. The code team stood frozen. What just? Someone began, but Dr. Laird cut him off. "Code cancelled," he said. The patient stabilized. "Everyone out." "But doctor," Carla started. "Out," he repeated, voice like a blade. "Now." One by one the code team filed out, murmuring, dazed. The crash cart rolled away. The room returned to its dim quiet. Only Carla and I remained, staring at bed 7. He lay there peacefully, eyes closed, chest rising and falling as though asleep. Carla turned to me, her face ashen. "You felt it, didn't you?" I nodded. He tried to take it. She looked at the door. Laird knew. He knew this would happen. We didn't speak again until shift change. When the day nurse came in, we simply handed over the chart, blank pages and all, and walked out together, silent. Outside, the sun was rising. My chest ached with each beat, pressed my hand to my sternum and swore I felt a seam there, a faint line, as if something inside me had been opened and closed again. For 3 nights after Code Blue, I refused to go home. I slept, if you can call it sleep, on the recliner in the break room, fully clothed, with a stethoscope around my neck. Each time my eyelids dipped, I saw the inside of that man's chest again, the pulsing nodes, the velvet darkness, the doorway of meat. Carla quit. She simply walked out at the end of her shift and never came back. HR sent a memo about her personal leave. I knew the truth. The way she looked at me before leaving, like someone watching a condemned cellmate, said everything. The ICU felt emptier, yet the patient in bed 7 was thriving. No arrhythmias, no ventilator issues, perfect vitals. His chart grew thicker with normal labs and normal imaging. He was a ghost wearing the mask of a man. Night, when the monitors dimmed and the corridors fell silent, I started to hear the whisper. Not in the vents this time. Not in my head either. It came from him. First it was a single word, faint, like static under a radio station nurse. Then phrases whispered at the edge of my hearing, still here, 2 hearts, not yours yet. I checked his restraints twice an hour, double-gloved for every contact. But no matter how far I stood from the bed, the whisper threaded the distance like a wire. One night I took his radial pulse and felt nothing. Not bradycardia, not a weak beat, nothing at all. Yet the monitor above showed a textbook 72 BPM. When I placed my stethoscope to his chest, I heard not one heartbeat but hundreds, layered like rain. Some sounded like newborns, some like galloping animals, some like my own. I pulled back, shaking. "Stop it," I whispered, not sure if I was talking to him or myself. "Stop it." His eyes snapped open. No pupils, just flat black discs. "You invited me," he whispered aloud this time. "You opened the door." I staggered backward, knocking over a tray of syringes. The crash of metal against tile jolted me into motion. I bolted to the supply closet and locked myself in, heart hammering, breath fogging the dark. Through the thin door, I heard his voice again. "It beats in you now. That was the last night I worked in the ICU. I called off sick the next evening, then quit entirely, moving to a smaller clinic in another city. I thought leaving would sever the connection. I was wrong. It's been 7 years since bed 7. I don't work in hospitals anymore. I rent a small flat near a harbor where fog rolls in every morning. I keep my blinds drawn and my phone off. No more night shifts. No more codes. No more heart monitors. Every night at exactly 3:33 a.m., I wake up to the sound of 2 heartbeats inside my chest. One is mine. The other is slower, deeper, and older. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to him. I've had every test. Normal EKG, normal echo, perfect labs. The cardiologist patted my hand and told me it was stress. He didn't see the faint seam down my sternum when I unbuttoned my gown. He didn't feel the cold pulse when I guided his fingers there. Sometimes, in the small hours before dawn, I feel it trying to open again, a tug, like invisible hands reaching from the inside. When I close my eyes, I see the ICU, the monitors, the door of flesh. I hear the voices whispering, "Not yours yet." Last week, a package arrived at my door with no return address. Inside was a single EKG strip, 2 rhythms overlapping perfectly. No note. I keep it under my pillow. It's easier than pretending it isn't real. Every time my heart skips, I imagine him standing at the foot of my bed, waiting for the final beat when the door opens completely. Waiting to step through. Waiting to take back what he left inside me. When that moment comes, if it hasn't already, no one will ever find a chart, a record, or a name. Just a nurse staring at nothing, listening to two hearts beating in the dark.
Subscribe for more videos.